Hello, this is National Chess Master Allrats at chess.com. I'm continuing my video series on how to play the openings. I've done a few of these. I want to do more when I get time. I've covered certain opening variations. But one thing I've discovered that's disturbing that I want to share is a defense that I found a lot of players are using. And it's not something that's recommended in any chess book, and I've been reading chess books since the 1960s. I've concluded that it's a defense that's been created by players who are introduced to chess by way of the internet. They join any chess site that has speed chess, and they play a speed game. And let me just illustrate first what these moves are. It's pushing rook pawns up. In English descriptive notation, which I learned, we call these pawn to king rook 3 and pawn to queen rook 3, and it's the same move for either side of the board from either side's perspective. In algebraic, it's h3, a3, h6, and h6. I'm going to refer to them as pawn to rook 3 moves or pawn to king rook 3 moves, just simply for illustrative purposes of this video. I think you'll find it easier, and I'll use some descriptive terms along the way. If you don't know English descriptive notation, I encourage you to learn it. That's the notation I learned. Algebraic is superior, but descriptive actually is better for naming squares. Anyway, why are people making these moves? They're not making them on the opening, but they're making these moves to keep bishops and knights. Let me color these squares in. If it will let me, sometimes it lags. I'm trying to color in g4, g5, b4, and b5. Okay, hopefully version 3 fixes this. Okay, well, it's not letting me do it. But they're trying to keep bishops and knights out of those squares. Why are they trying to do that? Well, because they got burned when a bishop and knight hit one of those squares. Let me give you an example that I'm assuming happened. I'm choosing not to show any actual games. I've run into countless games. My students, I started seeing it with my students. There's a father-son daughter that I've been teaching for a year. And every week we get together, see their games that they played, and their opponents be pushing their rook pawns up. And then now I'm doing a series on correspondence team match, my video lessons group versus Carpe Diem, and it's coming up at least 1 out of every 4 games. But what happens is I'm guessing is something like this. Now they see this threat, and they figure out to play d5 to block it, but they don't really understand book theory because they didn't open up a chess book. And suddenly white plays this stunning little sacrifice. They look at that and say, I can't let my queen and rook get forked. I'll have to take it. And then white plays queen f3, the fried liver, but they don't know theory. They don't know that black can hold on with king e6. So what happens is they put their king back on d8. White picks up this bishop, threatening a mate, and black's game just goes downhill fast. He's down a clear pawn, and black loses. Or maybe white is doing a fork on this square with his knight without this happening. Or sometimes this knight will find its way to b5 and it'll administer a fork. So what I'm seeing in a lot of games that my students were presenting to me, they didn't know theory. They against knight g5. Wait, no, they weren't playing knight f6. Against bishop c4, they came up with the move h6 on their own. This was their defense to keep the knight out of g5. Okay. Now I have a video, the first one of this series, where I recommend the Hungarian defense. This stops knight g5, and it does the most important thing that you need to do: develop a piece. And the Hungarian defense video is excellent. It's beyond the scope of what I'm going to do here. Check it out. Okay. But this also avoids the mainline theory that you'd have to stop and learn of the knight f6 or bishop c5 lines. Okay, so bishop e7 is a better move. Now let's start talking about why these rook pawn moves are bad, so we can talk general rules. Okay, number 1, every time you move a pawn, you weaken at least one square. A rook pawn will only weaken one square. Here you've weakened g6. The next thing that's wrong with it, you have not developed a piece. You're falling farther behind. If you stop and move this other pawn to keep a white piece out of b5, then you're falling behind again. You need your pieces in play. Relate this to a race. Say you're a 100-meter race. Do you want to give your opponent a 20-meter head start? I don't think so. That's what you're doing when you're shoving your rook pawns up, because your pieces that need to be developed won't be ready to come into action at the right time. Your winning chances will decrease, and your losing chances will increase. Okay? So it also, and I talked about this square. Let me show you an example of why this G6 square is weak. Okay, let's just play some random moves. We're not looking for the best move. We're going to make just developing moves. Okay, white castles. And now, let's see. Let's just play D3. I don't think D3 is the best move, but I'm just trying to illustrate a point. Okay, and that's not a good move because black has knight E4, but again, I'm trying to illustrate a point here. Now, white can occupy the G6 square because this pawn is pinned. He can put a knight there, he can put a pawn there, he can put a rook there, he can put a queen there. This wouldn't happen if this pawn was on H7. White could not play to G6. And again, I want to show another reason why this is a bad idea. Instead of playing the knight to G6, why H6 is a bad idea. Let's play the knight to F5. Again, I'm trying to illustrate a point. White now has potential sacrifices against these squares. Not in this position, but there will be positions that will occur where white can sacrifice. And he couldn't sacrifice on H6 if that pawn wasn't there. Imagine a situation where this bishop is on A3 and the queen is behind it. The bishop takes on H3 or H6. If black retakes, the queen comes down to H6 and is now threatening a checkmate. So that's another reason why your rook pawn moves are bad. Okay, now I'll give you another reason. I'm going to play this a little bit differently. Okay. Okay, again, I'm just developing moves with a purpose in mind. Not necessarily looking for the best moves. We're trying to show you the point. Okay, now black develops a piece. I'm just going to put this here. Now white's going to move a rook pawn, and I've said that's bad. Now what we have opposite side castling. Strategy says start a pawn storm. If you don't know what a pawn storm is, that means advance your pawns towards the enemy king. Try to break open lines. Okay, so black's going to start his pawn storm here. Okay, here comes white's. Here comes black's. And now we're going to bring the queen here just for the fun of it. I'm going to put this rook on the G file. Now I'm going to push this pawn. Now we're threatening to trap a bishop, so I'm going to save it. And just for the fun of it, I'm kicking it. Now I'm going to put the queen up here so I can swing the rook over. But let's see. I'm trying to do something specific here. And here I'm reaching the point of what I want to do. Okay, let's put this on D5. Okay, this is the point I'm trying to illustrate. Because that pawn is on H6, tension has occurred. What is tension? Tension means potential pawn captures. By moving your pawn up to the black moving his rook pawn up, tension occurs much quicker than it would have had it stayed back on H7. White would have had to advance both pawns up just to be able to play G6, in which case black still has some resources. One is to capture, and if this H pawn takes back, black can then push by H3, and unless white sacrifices on H6, black has an impregnable fortress set up. Okay, well, white can't crack it unless he sacks. Okay, so that's another reason. You're bringing tension closer, and that accelerates the white attack. Now, obviously, I was doing some things wrong here for white. I was pushing A3 to save the bishop. Black could have played B4. Yes, I know that. I'm just trying to illustrate a point. So there you have a lot of reasons why the rook pawn's move is not good. Let's look at another example and talk about bishops. Okay, let's examine something in the Nimzowitsch-Larsen attack. Okay. Black is playing for a pawn center. This is hyper-modern chess, where you attack a pawn center from the flanks. Okay, now black has a threat on the pawn. Okay, now I'm not sure of the exact theory, but just watch what can go wrong here in a hurry. Okay, black couldn't necessarily take here. Maybe bishop takes could come in. But I'm trying to illustrate a point. Now maybe white can play bishop takes because you see the knight's pinned and answer this with a check and pick up the bishop. So sometimes the bishop pin can be annoying, but usually it's not so bad. And I can give you countless positions. This would be a 30-minute video if I showed all the positions I've seen this occur. People are constantly moving their rook pawns up to stop bishops and knights from coming to these squares. And it still won't let me color them in. Well, a right mouse click should color them in. But you don't want to make these moves. And I've given you the reasons why. You're weakening your king's, your pawn shield in front of your king. You're weakening squares in front of your king. You're not developing pieces. You're making a potential pawn break against your pawns come all the quicker. What else can I say? If you're moving your rook pawns to stop these knights and bishops from coming to the knight 5 squares, or using English descriptive, g5 is king knight 5 or knight 5. b5 is queen knight 5 or knight 5. If you're doing this to stop bishops and knights from coming there, you're only hurting yourself. Let them come. More often than not, your opponent's not even planning to put something there anyway. And if he does, it's a waste of time. Okay? Now that doesn't mean you never push a rook pawn. There are certain positions where you do push your rook pawn. Mainline Ruy Lopez. White moves his h-pawn up to h3 before playing d4. There are positions where you do it. Every rule we tell you about in chess just about is made to be broken. But if you're moving your rook pawns, you're asking for it. Now, one other thing, what I would tell some of my students when they're moving their rook pawns up. Let me just show you this example. Okay. Say in a philidor defense. Let's see, how are these games going? Let's put this here. Oh wait, actually let's not put that. Let's not play d4. Let's play this move. Now they're playing h6. What I tell my students to do is break the position open. Okay? Here black is taking preventative maintenance to keep white out of the knight 5 squares. But I say, and I'll just sit there and look at these things. Say, look what we've got here. You've got 2 pieces developed. You've castled. Your opponent hasn't. You're now threatening to win a pawn, and we'll start playing over some possibilities. I say, now you've improved the position of your knight. Your knight's covering more territory, and your opponent hasn't developed yet. And I say, suppose he does something like this. You want to blast this position open, because if you do, your pieces are going to take advantage of the open lines. So here, black has some problems right now. Let's guard the knight. Well, let's see. It's actually not. I'm going to hold off on e5 just for a moment. I'm going to develop this first, because I'm telling him to break these positions open, and it's just going to lead to a very powerful game for them. But what they were doing, let's bring this over here. The moment white plays e5, he's got a huge lead in development. Both white rooks are in the center. Blacks are stuck. Black's queen's on the back rank. If this trend goes down to an ending, chances are white's going to land a powerful rook on the 7th rank. All kinds of possibilities. But what was happening in my games with my students, I had some trouble convincing them to do otherwise. Let's back it up. they weren't playing d4 and opening up the position. They were playing d3. And then what would happen would be their opponent would develop normally, and suddenly, you see, now these rook pawn moves become strengths. See, white can't put his bishop on g5 or f4, so it ends up maybe on e3, and black just starts slowly but surely catching up in his development, but white can't do anything. And then it turns out these rook pawn moves become strengths, and black catches up in development, and since white can't do anything with his pieces, my students were getting outplayed, mainly because they didn't open up the position. So you always want to look for ways to open up a position if your opponent's making these rook pawn moves early, because you could very likely score a quick knockout if they're wasting too much time not developing their pieces. And all the other strategies I've shown you, opposite side castle, start a pawn storm, set up a sacrifice on h6, try to get a knight to f5, try to place a piece on g6 if this diagonal remains open and unobstructed. Okay, I think I've said pretty much everything you want to know about these. Again, my advice is don't make these moves. You'll find your game will go much easier. You have nothing to fear. Yeah, there's going to be an exception where your opponent can do you in. It's going to be very, very rare. But again, I've read chess books for nearly 50 years. Okay? No grandmaster, no renowned master of any type ever suggested to move your rook pawns up to keep bishops and knights out of knight 5. Okay? None of them recommended. If anything, they said don't move your rook pawns up because it weakens your castle position. They do say that, but they don't specifically address it as I have. This is an internet-created defense by players that learned chess on the internet, played chess, most of their chess on the internet, and didn't bother to pick up a chess book and realize why these moves are wrong. Hopefully, in this 17.5-minute video, that's its time right now, I've taught you enough that, number one, you won't make this move, you'll get your pieces into play, and you'll have a 20-yard head start, 20-meter head start, and you'll be able to take advantage of it when your opponent makes these moves. Anyway, I thank you so much for your time. I've got great YouTube videos that explain everything clearly and logically and concisely, and they're entertaining. My video lessons group is the best chess coaching group on chess.com. Between us and the Dan Heisman Learning Center, we offer countless resources for free. You need to belong and get involved in our methods of improvement, because Dan and I are dedicated to helping chess players all over the world get better at this game. We're giving back to the chess community for the years of entertainment chess has given us. Once again, thanks so much, and keep your rook pawns back where they belong. Take care.